All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this CRADLE conversation. My name is Laura Halpin. I use she, her pronouns, and I am recording from my home in Walnut Creek, California, which is on the stolen land of the Bay Miwoks. And I would like to introduce my guest today before I introduce her, my friend and teacher, Dana STURTEVANT. Welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
It is good, always good to be in the same space with you, Dana. So I'm very excited to be here with you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for that.
So I wanted to introduce you. Dana has been, she and her business partner, Hillary Canavy, really provided a major turning point for me when I met them a couple springs ago, actually.
Yeah, it was in June.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
And
In June.
2 years ago when they showed up in Walnut Creek.
When we could meet together.
Yes. So Dana is a nutrition therapist. She's a facilitator, she's an educator, she's an activist, a writer, and she specializes in chronic dieting, disordered eating, and body acceptance. She is a certified motivational interviewing trainer, so really a specialist in teaching others in the science of behavior change counseling. And one of the things that I love about Dana, well, there's a lot that I love about Dana, but with her clients, what she's doing is focusing on healing relationships with food, not nutrition, not an emphasis on healthy eating, and on getting our heads out of our heads and back into our bodies to start relying on our body's cues to tell us what we need, when we need it, how much we need around nourishment. Dana, after working as a dietitian in the dominant weight paradigm, and I want to ask you about that, she started to realize that there was something unethical about her, about focusing on weight. It didn't seem to matter how much weight people lost. They still didn't like the size of their body, didn't like the shape of their bodies. And so she's been working to help people heal body shame, let go of chronic patterns of dieting and disordered eating, and moving toward a more sustainable form of weight neutral self-care. Her business is Be Nourished, and she is promoting a paradigm of paradigm of self-care, paradigm around what called body trust. I should know this, right? It's a paradigm around, or it's a method around what, Dana? Could you explain it?
Well, it's a weight inclusive paradigm is one way of saying it. It's an alternative to diet culture.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a more compassionate way of living in the body.
Yeah.
And taking care of oneself.
So could you just quickly explain the dominant weight paradigm in 2 sentences or less?
Quickly explain. Yes, I can do that. The dominant weight paradigm, sometimes we call it the traditional weight paradigm. Some people call it weight-centric models of care. Sometimes we might hear of it called a weight normative approach versus a weight inclusive approach, which is what we advocate for. And basically, the dominant weight paradigm asserts that certain size bodies are unhealthy and should strive to do whatever possible, including often including unhealthy behaviors, to pursue weight loss at all costs, and really holds up the pursuit of the thin ideal, often under the guise of health, while there's no evidence-based treatment for high body weight that leads to sustained and maintained weight loss.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, the dominant weight paradigm includes diet culture and keto and Weight Watchers and
Mm-hmm.
basically anyone who says that they know how to help you lose weight and keep it off.
Mm-hmm. 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 Thank you.
So basically everybody.
Everybody.
Basically most people
Yeah.
were trained in the dominant weight paradigm. And most healthcare providers and helping professionals uphold the dominant weight paradigm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so, I just wanted to explain that when I met you, I was starting to have very serious, just a lot of questions around what I was doing as a nutritionist and as a health coach, and couldn't see that even though I wasn't focusing on weight in my practice, that there was certainly an emphasis on what people could do to be healthy, kind of a hyper focus on individual behaviors. And so anyway, I just wanted to thank you publicly for your influence on me and my work, and yeah, for helping me see the connection between my work and social justice, which I hadn't seen before.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, Dana, I wanted to just welcome everyone who is going to be part of this conversation at a later date, and welcome them here. Invite them to come close and to feel community and connection and the sense of the comfort that comes from being in community, that cradle, and thank them for being here. Thank them for whatever they're going to carry forward from our conversation. So, as you know, the Cradle conversations have 4 questions. And the first one is, what cradles you?
Mm. What cradles me? And when you think about this, like, I know you started this in the midst of COVID, I believe. This, like, you weren't doing this before all of this, right?
Mm-mm.
So I find myself thinking specifically about what's cradling me right now, which might be a little different than what it would have been 2 months ago, or what it might be 2 months.
A billion months ago, you mean?
Yeah, it feels like forever ago. I think I've thought of a couple things. One is just repeating to myself that this is temporary. Like, I think that's a phrase that I return to again and again and again. And I think right now there's something a little that can be soothing about that this isn't going to last forever, that yes, this is really uncomfortable. I think naming my grief, like, and really acknowledging and reminding myself that I'm grieving feels really, there's something honoring of what I'm feeling. And I find myself naming and renaming grief all the time. And I loved what I was listening to Lama Rod Owens on Dawn Sarah's podcast, or not, at the Explore More conversation. And he was talking about just acknowledging our heartbrokenness. And I'm finding that reminding myself that that's part of this is there's something, I don't know if it connects me to my humanity or reminds me that I'm feeling something, that I'm having an emotional experience besides anxiety, which I'm not somebody who's prone to anxiety, but I'm in perimenopause and I have more anxiety than I've had in my life. And then this has just been, but I think sometimes it's the only thing I can be aware of. And so reminding myself that there's other feelings here and naming the grief and the brokenheartedness is really honoring.
Could I ask you a little bit more about the grief? Could you, and this is a really personal question, so you can say that you don't want to answer it, but I'm just wondering, what is some of your grief about? What are you grieving?
I am grieving.
It's a hugely personal question, I realize that.
Yeah. I mean, to premise this, I'm somebody who's kind of obsessed with grief. Anyway, just because I think in the work we do of helping people reclaim their bodies, there's so much that we grieve. So I'm always, I read a lot about grief and the grieving process, and I, you know, given in the midst of, you know, it appears like in the midst of this pandemic that we all have, the way we come to terms with this happens over time, and the realities of our lives and how this is going to impact our lives and how long it may impact our life. And I think some people in our culture just aren't even moving beyond denial. But I find thinking about looking at this through a grief lens really helps me understand why people are struggling. And I think I'm grieving the loss of normalcy, the loss of choice. We don't have very many choices of what we can do right now. I'm grieving. I'm a huge concert goer, and music is something that cradles me. Like I go to a minimum of 2 live shows a month, I would say, and sometimes I go weekly, and sometimes I'm going a couple times a week. And I'm really grieving the idea that like it may be a couple of years before that. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm grieving the country that we don't have. Ooh, I watched Michelle Obama's
documentary
on Netflix
last night. Did you see it? Yeah.
I cried, and I'm like, oh, you're grieving. This is grief. You're looking like, oh, we had this.
Yeah.
We had intelligent people. We had people who cared. Yeah. So I was just noticing like that.
Yeah.
Like that's grief.
Yeah.
I'm feeling there. I think it's more present than we think.
Yeah.
I think we think about it as around death, and that's all. But there's constantly death and rebirth. And so I think naming it helps me get out of my head and feel.
I think grief has come up in previous conversations, but this is the first time that I feel like we've kind of gone into it more, and I really appreciate I think it's so important. And I think it's really important that you are a person who moves toward it, because so much of our culture scampers away from it, you know? And so thank you for just being willing to answer those questions. I really appreciate it. It
Yeah.
seems like a really important process, because yeah, there's not much around us that's encouraging us to open up to grief.
No, I mean, we're really, as a society, habituated not to feel.
Mm.
And I think it has a huge impact on our lives when we are not able to navigate our emotional landscape and have a language for it, which is why so many people adopt the language of food and fat. And they don't know how to talk about their internal experience other than through shame and guilt and fatness. That's why people say, I feel fat. Well, it's not a feeling. So what are you feeling? But we lose our emotional world. We lose access. And Arundhati Roy had something to say about this, and that the conversation she had.
Pandemic is a portal.
Pandemic is a portal. And I think one of it, to be unafraid of feeling is a powerful thing, she said. To be unafraid of feeling. And in this talk with Lama Rod, he said, the work ahead is taking care of our grief and mourning it and loving and releasing the trauma. And that's another lens that helps me right now. I think like we're all traumatized by this. So the work ahead is taking care of our grief, mourning it, loving and releasing the trauma, and letting go of the person we used to be and the world we used to live in.
Wow.
And he says, and this is the part I wanted to share, not all of us will be able to do the work or will choose not to do it.
Yeah. Wow. To be unafraid of feeling is a powerful thing. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. You said that one of the things that cradles you is this is temporary. And I have a very similar tool, and it's to preface things with in this moment. In this moment, I'm happy. In this moment, I'm sad. In this moment, this sucks. You know, everything, just the suggestion that it's here and it's passing through, you know. So
yeah. Yeah, that there's, I mean, I've even heard that, like, I think it was in Tara Brach's book that she said the lifespan of a human emotion is 90 seconds. And
it's forever.
If it hangs around longer than that, your mind has just gotten a hold of the process.
Oh, that is interesting.
But that there's like this wave, but we resist. I mean, I've literally seen myself and like observed myself while meditating, be like, no, look, we're not going there. Almost like just look away from myself.
Yeah.
I was sitting
look
still,
away.
I could feel
look
it.
Away.
And I was like, no, turn towards. But we wanna run. And I want to say, as people listen to this, this is not, it's not accessible all the time. Like I walk around feeling numb too, and only anxious, especially right now. So it's not all the time, but you know, something you did before we started this was just like, how do you like bringing your hand on your chest and pausing, and if I can do that, that creates some possibility for noticing.
Thank you. The second question is, do you have a cradle to offer?
Do I have a cradle process? Is that what you said?
A cradle to offer.
A cradle to offer. Meaning like a practice or
something that might help us cradle ourselves.
I mean, I think what I just shared is one thing I think about is gentle touch. Like if I'm feeling disconnected and wondering how is it in there, like just touching my chest and patting, just a warm touch. Sometimes, you know, in this moment, if you want to do it, you could bring your hand to your heart, over your heart. You might sit back. And then I love the practice of bowing the critical mind to the compassionate heart. So just taking a bow and taking some breaths. And sometimes to ground in the moment, just noticing, breathing in, know that you're breathing in. And breathing out, just notice that you're breathing out. Breathing in, just notice that you're breathing in. And breathing out, just notice that you're breathing out. And you might see if you can notice where in the body your breath begins and where does it end. And no need to change the breath. Nothing to do other than noticing. And when your mind gets busy, wondering if you're doing it right, just notice that you're thinking and come back to the breath. I like to notice if my jaw is tight, if my teeth are clenched, and just relax the jaw, let the teeth part. You might notice if the tongue is pressed up on the roof of the mouth and just let it drop. And on your next exhalation, you might let go with an audible sigh. And let your hand release from your chest. And just noticing, how is it in there? Like more times than not, when a poem that sometimes comes to mind, the first line is something that, like, it only takes a moment to be still, a reminder to breathe. And just like that, something in me settles and softens and makes space for imperfection, I think is the line.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
And it doesn't take much, especially if we practice a little bit. We can drop in.
What was it? Bowing the critical mind to the
Compassionate heart.
okay. The the posture of that was really powerful.
Yeah. I'm a big, I feel very energetically pulled towards anything with the body that shows some kind of surrendering.
Mm, mm, yeah.
So like bowing.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite yoga poses is to just lay on the floor with my belly down and my arms up over my head, with my forehead, that third chakra, like
Mm-hmm.
just on the earth.
Mm-hmm.
There's just a surrendering, yielding,
Mm-hmm.
letting go,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
like anything that allows me to embody letting go.
Yeah, interesting. It's amazing how much, and I mean, I know this is what you do, but it's amazing how much our emotions follow form. You know, we take the shape, our bodies do this, and we feel an expansion. You know, you bow and you feel a surrender. And so it's really amazing how so often we think we have to start in our head and have that drive things, you know.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So that was actually a combination of questions 2 and 3. So way to go.
I just decided to just
You can do
go
whatever
for it.
you want. Never do follow the rules, do you, Dana? And
Cradle
then
yourself. Don't follow the rules.
break them all. All right. So the last question is, do you have a vision or blessing for the collective?
Do I have a vision or blessing for the collective?
And the reason that I ask this is because I think that it's so important for us to have a vision of something else, something better, something more whole. And so that's where the question comes, helping us cultivate this idea of what else is possible here.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I feel like one thing I was thinking about was just, we use it a lot with our body trust provider community, and the idea of geese and how they fly in formation.
Mm.
And oftentimes when we actually just wrote that blog about like how to talk to people about body trust.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the recommendations that we made in there was like, to, when you're telling people, like, to say, I'm part of a growing community of people who are concerned about the health effects of the war on people's bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And to do that, to generate a vision of us beside each other,
Mm-hmm.
that we have community. And we talked about this somewhere, and somebody was getting like emotional, just like, oh my gosh, that would be so helpful to me when I'm learning to hold my ground and speak for what I believe in, to envision that you're all there beside me.
Mm-hmm.
And like, we've got your back.
Mm-hmm.
And whether we're using, the vision of penguins and the way they winter and they gather in big circles of birds, and the most vulnerable are in the inside, and the people who feel most resilient and have the strength to withstand the winds on this day and this moment take the outside edges of that circle and the vulnerable go in and it rotates. Obviously, there's some people that are always in the middle. But that I love that vision of birds and the way they flock and the way they commune, and they give enough space, but they're protecting each other. They're solidarity together. And when you think about birds that fly in formation, there's something like 70% more efficient than flying alone, and how we need each other. That's what it says. And when they fly in formation, they're using less effort, but they're more effective. And if one gets wounded, two come out of the flock to take care of and tend to until they can go, until that bird either passes on and then they go find another formation, or until that bird is healed and then they go back and find the formation together. And I love that idea of community. So I can read something that Adrienne Marie Brown, if I can pull it up. Yeah. She says, birds don't make a plan to migrate, raising resources to fund their way, packing for scarce times, mapping out all their pit stops. They feel a call in their bodies that they must go, and they follow it, responding to each other, each bringing their adaptation. She says, there is an art to flocking, staying separate enough not to crowd each other, aligned enough to maintain a shared direction, and cohesive enough to always move towards each other. So may we always move towards each other.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I love that so much. I just love the image of the penguins and how their circle of protection is dynamic.
Yeah.
There's just this understanding that sometimes we're going to be moving toward the middle, and sometimes we're outside, and there are some people who are always in the inside, and that's okay, And so that's so, it's interesting that we can learn about our humanity by studying species that aren't human,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it gets us back to our nature.
So I just wanted to go back. So what cradles you is the phrase, this is temporary, and naming, moving toward your grief. What cradles us and what we can practice is tender touch and bowing the critical mind to the compassionate heart. And that whole idea of moving into a posture with our bodies that brings us to a place of surrender. I think that's really beautiful. And then the whole idea of what it means to be in community, that we're more efficient and more protected when we're together.
Yeah. And stronger, I think.
Yeah. Amen. Thank you.
You're welcome. If there's ever a time where you see how we are not individuals, we are one society, global society.
Yeah. And I mean, these cradle conversations for me are looking for those people who are not the people on the outside of the ring necessarily, but who have that sense of like, we got to do this together, you know, we need one another, and there's so much that needs to be fixed. But you know, Desiree Adaway talks about how we can never throw anyone away, and I think that's part of, you know, what I'm looking for when I'm reaching toward people like you, is that sense of strength that comes from vulnerability, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And that, you know, there's a few pieces that I will constantly return to when it's hard. And there's, you know, one Clarissa Pinkola Estes piece that's "We were made for these times." And I have to, that's another thing I say to myself a lot, is we were made for these times.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So I want to again just acknowledge that there's people joining across space and time, and to just invite them and us to feel the connection that comes from being in conversation and being in community, and a reminder that we are together and that we can provide protection for one another. And so thank you so much, Dana Sturdevant,
You're welcome.
being here and just providing that cradling for us. I appreciate your presence so much. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
for having
you.
me.
Good
Thanks
to be
for
with
doing
you.